Hello, welcome to Backstage at Bug. This is the 5th and final episode of Season 1. I am your host, Courtney Askey, and this episode I am joined by National Opera, previously known as Breakfast. Thank you so much for joining and watching and listening to the previous episodes and our new podcast in general. It's been really great to see so many of you watching and being engaged with this project. And thank you so much for all of the bands and acts who have given up their time and come in and spoken to me and shared their work and their ideas with us. It's been super interesting hearing from everyone and seeing the variety of people and works being made in Leicester. So this is the final episode that we are releasing for now. We might be back for a season 2 potentially. We'll see, but if there is anybody who you would be really keen to hear more about who's based in Leicester, please do let us know, and we'll keep that in mind for the future. But for now, enjoy this episode. It's a really lovely one. The guys from National Opera are so lovely and funny, and it's great hearing them talk about their music. Since this was recorded, they released a fantastic single, which if you're listening to the Spotify version, you will hear very shortly. If not, go check them out. They're on all streaming services, and they've got some really wonderful, fun, danceable songs to take a listen to. And go check them out if you see them playing live at some point soon. But yeah, enjoy this episode, and thank you so much for listening to the whole series. Give us a like, give us a comment, share, subscribe, all of the rest. It always makes a difference when we know that you're listening, and it feels like we can put some faces and names to numbers. It's always special. So thank you so much for joining. Yes, and enjoy this episode. Food has arrived for the listeners. Waffles. Thank you. Nice. Thank you, Paul. With the maddest meal I've ever seen, with the pink cooch and the waffles.
Gotta get the coverage now.
Yes.
We do breakfast properly.
It's more time.
Oh yeah, do you want some
Thank
like
you very much.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really going to be good for the listeners.
See, this is the problem. Is now I've only got one hand, but it's fine. We're going to make it work. So you were previously in another band. All three of you were previously in another band.
Yeah.
With other people, and then that became something into this one that is. So the way you sort of write is by passing ideas amongst each other. Is that correct? But like digitally mostly.
Yeah, I think what I really like about this is that we tend to get files, and we don't really get told where it's come from or inspiration. So especially when I add things, I've not got in the back of my head, oh, like it's going to sound like this, and oh, I wanted it to sound like this song. You kind of add your own colour into it, and it seems to work quite well in that sense, rather than being in a rehearsal room and going, oh, wouldn't it be great if this sounded like the drum sound on Revolver by the Beatles or something? Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point, yeah, because I was often start a song being like, oh, I want it to sound like this, or I want to steal the drum sound.
That's a really good idea. No.
There's this battle, but kind of works really well in the end. Well, I hope.
Yeah.
So, can I ask who plays what instruments?
I primarily sing. Sometimes during live, I have to play keys, but I'm 90% of the time I'm singing.
Yeah, I'm keys and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, and guitar and a tiny bit of glockenspiel. Actually, on one of the songs.
Yeah.
So, firstly, how are you enjoying the breakfast?
It was good until that. No, it was.
We're different. We're changing the band name now.
We're now called Firebug Breakfast. I didn't know you guys did breakfast.
No.
Well, there we go. Mission accomplished.
There you go. And even less did I know that you did waffles.
How are the waffles?
So good.
Could you tell me what your typical process from? I suppose you'll all be different. That's the best thing about working with bands, is that everyone has a very different method, and that is why bands work in an interesting way. So I'm going to start over here and ask you, what is your process of writing from the very, very first get-go to having an idea to it getting on stage or getting recorded or whatever?
Yeah, so normally what happens is Chris sends me an idea, It could be a small thing, it could be a bigger thing, and he goes, I don't know, he just says, write something for this. And first off, I kind of do have a little like notes page on my phone where I idly like write snippets of ideas, and I'll go through that, see if there's anything that catches my eye, and then sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and then I try and like think what am I writing here, like what's the theme I'm trying to go for, and I'll try and just expand on that, and then you know, a few weeks later, Chris hasn't heard back from me, and I'm like, I should probably record that and send something to him, and then I do a few more weeks later, and then Chris is often like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, let's just like work around with that. He'll mess around with that, send it back and like finish it now, and then I don't, and then Gary eventually gets hold of it and does his magic, but yeah, for me it's just I just try and focus on like, you know, I just think, what's my theme, what am I trying to write about, and I just try and stay on that topic. And sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. I quite like it when I don't, because sometimes it evolves into an idea that I didn't originally have. And I look back at it, I'm like, that's what that's about, sort of thing. I think it's really interesting, that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So you're the only lyricist?
Chris has written a few of the songs, some of the early stuff he wrote, and just got me to sing those. But for the most part, I don't know. I don't know what the split is currently.
It's mostly you now. I think there's one song that I sing on, but yeah, I think it's kind of like I try not to produce in the early stage too much of kind of what I want you to say or what I want the melody to sound like. And I think, like we were saying earlier, the lack of kind of context that we give if we're passing ideas between each other really lends to a quite, well, confused sound, hopefully in a good way.
Whilst we're on the topic of lyrics, let's talk about that. Do you have any specific like reference points for writing lyrics, and what like in your life impacts that for you? Yeah, so
I think when there's a big jump, a big change from like the old band we used to play in, where it's a bit more like, I think I would say the old style was a bit more like pointed, and it's quite, I guess, political in a way of what I was trying to write back then. But then when we started this band, Breakfast, it kind of became a bit more introspective, a lot of the writing, and a lot of it became sort of like my life post-uni, I guess. A lot of that was a big inspiration, and other things happening in my life. And then and that was like, especially for like what we've got now, a lot of it was that sort of introspective aspect of that time where I was like away from everyone and missing everyone, and trying to find myself as an adult in a way. That's a big point. And then a lot of the times, especially when I sit down to write, it for me it's a case of like, I do draw from what I've been listening to other musicians do, like bands I like and enjoy, and like I don't try and like copy them, but I do draw from like I don't know, I listen to how they write songs or like write lyrics, and I'm like, I like this bit of that, I'm like how they do these things, and I try and incorporate some of that elements into my writing of lyrics.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to influence, it's sometimes you don't know that you're being influenced until somebody tells you, or it's quite subliminal. And I think influence can be quite a broad thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be music. It could be so many different things. So, yeah, nice. And you were talking earlier about, I don't know, I think this might have been when we were mid-food, so we didn't record this, but we were talking about how your relationship with knowing somebody has had somebody in mind where they've been writing something, and that changes your feelings around the sound.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that I kind of struggle where a lot of times ideas come from things and people are quite vocal in showing where they've taken it from, or what they want it to sound like, or what album they want it to sound like. I think it kind of puts you down a tunnel, to be honest, in terms of what you want to do yourself. Because one of my favourite things is getting an idea and having absolutely no context and sort of scratching my head trying to work out what I can do to it and trying to find my own inspirations that would fit the vibe of the song. But I think when you get given a brief, it tends to work against you most of the time. I find.
The kind of act of like reining it in and like I sense some tension. Yeah, so the idea of having this like untamed thing and then shaping it without like, I don't know, without any pre-existing restraints.
Yeah, exactly that. Like if someone sends something, it's like, oh, wouldn't this be really good if it sounded like Radiohead? It kind of puts you down a tunnel that you can't get out of, I find.
I don't know, I think it's interesting because I think I said earlier that when I start out often, it's I want to copy someone or I want a song that evokes something that's similar to a song that I've listened to at some point. But somehow it never ends up sounding at all similar and often completely different. So I don't know. Maybe that's just because I'm rubbish at creating what I want, but it works not against me, for me, in my favour.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, typically a good thing, isn't it? You get that kind of like melting pot effect of if you've got one idea and then actually it turns out to be the opposite, but then you make something new with that like third thing that emerges.
Well, yeah, this is, again, it's like not giving too much context away helps us kind of do something different. Like often, I think there's one song where I was like really going for a like disco thing, and then Gary wrote something that's quite mathy instead, and I was like, oh no, I wanted like who's the guy from Chic? Oh my god,
Nile Rodgers.
Nile Rodgers.
You
Jesus
say that
Christ.
To me a lot, actually.
I'm like,
Make it more Nile Rodgers.
Can we have Nile Rodgers? And then you're just doing like something really mathy and weird, and I just can't understand it, but it works. Just basic. I just want to be in Chic.
That's a fun question. If you could be any musician / in any band as yourself, you have to decide which one. Who would you be, or what band would you be in as you?
I'd be in Daft Punk because they wear helmets and you can like walk down the street and also make killer music and like impress an arena, and then you just retire at 40.
And also Nile Rodgers in Daft Punk.
And I'll be Nile Rodgers in Daft Punk.
Yeah. I've always said if Slowdive rang me up and said, do you want to join, it would be easy, because even before I heard Slowdive, I sounded like Slowdive. So anything down that line. Was that kind of like dream pop? Shoegaze.
Nice.
Oh god, if anyone, people who know me will know what my answer is, but basically Jonathan Higgs from Everything, because I think he's just a fascinating lyricist, and every time I listen to a song they write, I'm just like, I want to write like that. It just fascinates me, like just how lyrically complex his musical ideas are, and I'm just like, I would love to be like that.
It's a joke, isn't it? Like, it seems like writing about like a fat child in a pushchair. Yeah. Like, how can you write something serious? But it's so like poetic and like lovely, meaningful. And
I'm a lyricist as well, and I always feel that way. I feel really passionate about lyricists, and I want to be you. But I don't get that feeling. I also play an instrument, and I think you do as well. I didn't get that feeling about people who play instruments, but I wonder what that relationship is with like lyrics that makes you feel that way.
I don't know. It's just it's weirdly, I always feel like it's this. I mean, people love singers in bands, but people don't normally necessarily care about the lyrics of a song. They love the guitars and the drums and the bass line stuff and the vocal melody and stuff. But I mean, there's always the thing of like there's all these songs that like everyone loves and dances to, but then like if you look below the surface, you're like, oh, this is actually quite a dark, heavy song about like quite a traumatic thing almost. And for me, I don't know. I've always been drawn to lyrics of music, and for me, even though like I mean, there's a lot of songs I love which are quite like simple lyrically wise, but then like my favorite ones always are just like I just love like deconstructing them and trying to figure out like what does this mean? Like I think another band I think that exemplifies this is The National. Matt Berringer, he writes some amazingly poetic things, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like it's amazing.
I'm a huge National fan as well, so I totally understand that. Exactly. Have you listened to their podcast that they did with two guys? Basically did a podcast called Coffee and Flowers, and it was them analysing every lyric from the album Boxer.
Yes. Oh, I love that album. No, I've not listened to it. I need to listen to that.
It's great, but they do interviews with the band, and they basically talk about, and he talks about that, and he talks about his lyrics and how he writes, and it is so fascinating hearing his process of like, he reads a lot of books, and therefore like that weird storytelling element comes through, which I think is quite obvious. But then also he talks specifically about putting two images together, or like skewing a common phrase, like eyes glazing under rather than eyes glazing over, and that kind of thing. Do you ever kind of like do that kind of playfulness with language?
Yeah, there's loads of like in some of our songs, I put, I guess, little jokes in there that only I know or get. Like I think there was, I didn't even mean to write it, but I think it's in our song Superman. There's like just a lyric in it where I'm just like, if you're happy, clap your hands. And I was sort of like, I wrote that, and I sort of looked at it, I was like, oh my god, like I didn't even mean to do that, but that's very funny.
Yeah, look, there's like in-jokes you can make for yourself in songs. Do you guys feel the same way about like musically? I'd like to hear like what your thoughts on that, like writing your own little things that you can like fall in love with about your own work.
I think it's one of the most frustrating things, is that kind of some of the best ideas are completely simple. Yeah. And this may be the same thing with lyrics, is like some of the best hooks on earth are just cliches, and then they're just incredibly powerful, and it gives you that kind of jealousy, because it's just like, why didn't I think of that? Why couldn't I do that? And then you write something that's maybe cliched yourself, and then I don't know, maybe you don't feel comfortable enough to put it out there. And yeah, it's the same with kind of writing a melody or a riff or something. It's like sometimes the cheapest ones, do the best.
Yeah, I always really got frustrated when I'd come up with like a really cool hook or a melody, and sometimes it gets buried, because the way I tend to record guitars is I'll do like 7 or 8 guitars at one point. But going back to putting my in-jokes and stuff, there's loads of parts I can hear on it and go, that is ripped off from this, that is ripped off. I'm really glad I did this. But then similarly, there's some parts I hear and then I listen to like an album I haven't heard in years, and oh my god, I've actually been inspired by that, I've ripped that off completely. I think it's fun to sometimes look back at what you've done and go, I'm really glad that I managed to nail that idea, or nail that kind of 2 guitar parts working together like this song.
If you like have a real stuck day and you need to, I don't know, ignite some kind of writing thing, what do you turn to?
I think sometimes not listening to music's the best thing. It can be really hard to, if you really want to write something, try and listen to something that you think might inspire you, but then you just end up writing that, or not writing that. But sometimes I think just, I don't know, going outside or doing something else that's a bit distracting can do that. But I think as well that before, the lack of jeopardy with this is that we all do things on our own time. So I think often I only write when I want to write, or when I feel inspired. I very rarely sit down to write and like don't have any ideas, or don't feel like I've got any ideas. And if I do, I'll just stop. I'll just do something else.
Yeah, I always find the best things I've ever written, I've not written sitting at an instrument. I've always like heard them in the back of my head, or I've like been singing them when I've been walking about. But I tend to get inspired a lot by not. If I'm feeling like a bit bored of pop music or guitar music, I'll listen to like completely off the wall things, you know what I mean, like classical and things like that, which I know sounds very pretentious, like totally pretentious, but like movie soundtracks, I love that, and I love layers, like instruments working in layers. That really helps me nail ideas sometimes. Yeah. Like, we've worked on songs before and I've absolutely just been scratching my head and I can't work it, and then I'll go listen to something completely different. I think I've told you this, but there's the chorus of Rest of the Night is kind of like Hot and Cold by Katy Perry.
I think you have told me.
Have I told you before? Yeah. that's a good guitar hook. Yeah.
In Superman, actually, in the pre-chorus, we sampled the BBC News theme tune.
We did. Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's hidden underneath all.
Do you want to tell anybody that? It feels like something that you need to not tell people for licensing purposes.
If the BBC find this, they can have the song. Like I saw an interview with Fatboy Slim, and they were going through some of his songs, and it's like songs that are 20 years old now, and they were like, oh, what about that one? It's like, oh no, I can't talk about that. They still haven't found it and stuff. So, but if the BBC find this and want Superman, they can have it.
I think it was one of those weird things where I went through a weird obsessive phase with the BBC News theme for some reason, and I remember just lying in bed watching it. I was like, because I found like the full version, and there was this about boop, 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 and I remember texting like, oh my god, hear me out, trust, sample this, put this in, it'll work, and you were like, no. Go on then. It would have been around 2020. I don't know why. I was on furlough at the time, so I was just bored. And just remember, got obsessed with like really weird things, and BBC News themes were one of them.
I mean, that is like that screams pandemic lockdown activity.
Probably looking back, it's quite traumatic actually. Yeah. Like, that song itself is quite kind of like too much news, too much everything like that. Yeah. So it's weird how that lends itself, and it wouldn't fit in any of the songs. So.
I guess like a kind of weird thing. I think I joked about it before where I said, Chris sends me an idea, I write lyrics, and then I don't get back to him for like 3 months. But it's normally time for me. Like sometimes I will write something, and I'll be like, oh, I like this, and I'll send it to Chris or whatever. He messes around with it, and then he's like, oh, I finished the song. And I'm like, oh god, I don't know how to finish this song. Like I don't even know how to do like a second. I'm like staring at my writing. I'm like, how do I continue this? And I leave it. I just leave it. I just put it outside and just try and forget about it. And then maybe like a few weeks later, I'm having a shower and suddenly I'm like, oh my god, that's it. That's the key. Yeah. That or I do work night shifts, and I find my train ride home when I'm delirious really helps.
So I'm ready for their day, and kind of you're just like
on my phone like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm writing, but it's something.
Do you ever find that when you like leave ideas for a while, sometimes you come back to them and you're like, fucking hell, that's the best thing I've ever written? Like I think that's how I can tell if I'm gonna like a song or if I'm gonna keep working on a song, is maybe I'll write quite a bit in one big block and then listen to it too many times, trying to think of what to do next. Then I'll leave it for like a couple of weeks, a month maybe, and I'll come back to it and I'll be like, fucking yes, or I'll be like, what was I thinking?
All the time. Like I recorded something for you like not long ago, and I think at the time I was like, oh, I really like this because I like the sample you sent me, and then I like look back at the lyrics, I'm like, this is terrible. Like, what was I thinking? I hate it.
I think it's been the opposite though, because I had it recently where I lost my laptop, but I managed to back everything up, and I was going through all these like projects and just finding loads of ideas I completely forgotten about, and thinking, what like you get those moments of just being totally creative and you just completely in the moment, and then you just forget about it. And I remember going back to them, and so many things I was like, there's like one bar of a certain thing that's repeated, and being like, where did I get that from? But I'm like really happy that did make it to the final mix.
It's interesting you talk about how sitting on stuff is a good thing, like having big pauses in between writing, because I'm the exact opposite. Like if I don't finish a song in one sitting, then it's never going to happen. I just hate it. Like it's like, feels like it's more laboured, and I can't bring myself to, I don't know, to like it. But having that like very analytical way of working makes for an interesting sound, I think.
It depends on how much you've written in the first sitting. Like if I've just written a drum sat track or just a chord sequence and maybe a bit of a melody, it's really hard to jump back in. But if I've written a verse and then a chorus and then maybe something else with a bit more complexity, the drum part's partially full and there's a few more melodies and background elements going on, it's easier to kind of jump back in and draw, and maybe you hear something that you didn't hear before, even though you wrote it. I think,
I tend to get bored really easy as well. So if I don't finish what I'm doing, then if I come back to it in a few weeks, I tend to just be like totally over it and can't really find a way back in.
What are you working on at the minute? Is there anything in particular, or are you kind of, what stage are you at currently?
We're in period of reflection, to be honest, because we're looking back on what we've done. I know we've only done one album, but with the certain elements that we really like about it and certain things we're kind of over and not really keen to repeat. So I think we're just trying to work out what exactly we want to do next, to be honest.
Yeah, so we released an album in July, at the start of July. And it was kind of 2 years of work in that, kind of started in the pandemic, and then you know, it took a lot of time, maybe a lot longer than we hoped because of the pandemic and other things. And also, like, we're young people trying to, you know, get paid and like, you know,
You're
around a lot. So it's sometimes those stumbling blocks kind of so I think we're just kind of, we've got one song that we're kind of working on that's new, and then I think
Take that one.
the take that one.
Can I ask what makes it the take that one?
It's just
There's a lyric in it, in the delivery.
it's
It
so
sounds
Gary
exactly like Gary
Barlow.
Barlow.
Is that you're doing?
Yes, I really like it, but they keep telling me it sounds like Gary Barlow.
We added harmonies. We're like, that is totally take that. We're not doing that.
I think I've come back around on it and I like it again though.
I don't like the verse. The verse is terrible.
But that opening line.
Well, no, the open line's bad. The chorus is good.
So you're working on you take that number.
Well, it's to put it in perspective, it's got a bit of like a cadence that's a bit like da 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 da.
Yeah.
And it just feels really cheesy and kind of, I don't know.
A problem solving period of like breaking down a song.
Well,
and
I think we put a lot of effort into the album, and there's lots of things, like Gary said, that maybe we'd do differently next time, or you know, lots of things we've learned. It was largely a very positive process, though, and it was nice to do something so tangible. Because like all the advice on the internet says like release singles for streaming services, but it's just, it felt nice to create something that went together.
It felt quite nice to draw a line under it as well, because it was 2 years worth of work, and it was quite specific what we would do it, and it was really nice just to say, well, that's done now, we're moving on to the next thing, or however we're going to do it. But it felt quite nice to have closure on that certain period, I think.
Yeah, so I think we'll get back into our groove soon, and hopefully, you know, new music, you know.
new music coming soon.
Oh well, no,
Famous last
really
words.
not. Take that coming soon. Gary Barlow, eat your heart out. Maybe he'll sue us like the BBC.
I'd love to talk about gig stories. Have you done much gigging? How much gigging have you guys done?
We've done a handful.
You might not have like the backlog. Maybe throughout your bands through the years, but
In this band,
yeah, other stuff. Because I feel like some of the best conversations between musicians are about the worst gigs you've ever done. I feel like often that can be very entertaining. Sometimes it's just bleak, sometimes it's funny.
Yeah, we did one gig in Sheffield where we basically got there and the band wouldn't lend any equipment, and we were told we could, so our drummer had to assemble a drum kit out of pots and pans and rubber bands and stuff.
It's not even like, not even just like equipment that you might not usually share. It was a snare stand, and I think he stacked it up on like 2 beer crates in the end.
Yeah. And we got there, and the green room was the kitchen, and I remember the chef like stepping over my amp and stuff, and I was like, this is so weird.
Yeah, and it was like a pre-drinks bar in Sheffield, so there were lots of people just coming in and like getting shots and like sitting in the corner talking, and it's like I'm not it sounds really like arsey to be like, listen to us, but also like it was really distracting.
There's many sites that are like you looking off stage and seeing people just being like ha da 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 with other people. That's like, why am I here?
And they wouldn't lend me a fork. I decided, I was like, oh, I need some dinner, so I ordered myself some, like, I think it was just some ramen from my Wagamama's on Deliveroo, and they didn't give me cutlery. I was like, oh God, you want to ask for cutlery? Didn't give me any. So I went to the bar stand. I was like, you got a fork? And they're like, no. So I remember I ran out, tried to find a shop that had anything, came back, and they didn't have anything on me. So I basically started eating this like bowl of ramen with my hands.
Really?
Yeah, I did. And then like someone from behind the bar was like, do you want a fork? I was like, you just said you didn't have a fork. It was like, yeah, here's a fork. I'm like, oh my God, I'm halfway through this bowl of ramen.
I don't think I've ever experienced anyone trying to eat ramen with their hands, and I'm so intrigued.
Like, I've got this bowl of ramen. It's going to go cold.
I think it's interesting that you chose the hand method instead of like ramen's largely soupy.
Well, no, I was slurping and like eating the noodles with my hand. Like, and
Honestly, the things you get into when you play these gigs.
I'll tell you what, the late night. Me and Gary are a big fan of late night drives. Late night drive back was incredible. We love late night drives. Yeah. Just like going on the motorway, listen to something that's like really driving and kind of incredible. There's some music that's just made for that.
I 100% agree. What are your favourite late night drive albums? A non-skip a non-skip album, one each.
Singles by Future Islands. I like the driving bass line in just every song. It's also like an absolute summer album, but you know, something about it late night works really well.
Gold by ABBA. Honestly, slaps, man. Yeah.
It's not quite what I was expecting, but I like it's
Night Driver.
Here we go. He's getting this
really
one.
bad. I'm like just like quickly looking at my phone, like what do I listen to on a night drive? Oh God. I guess anything by LCD Sound System, really. There's like, you know, like I am wearing the shirt. Yeah.
I remember when we drove back from Sheffield, we had no reptiles on.
Yeah.
And it was my first car. I remember we were going like 100 miles per hour singing the harmonies.
Gary likes to think he drives fast.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
You were going the speed limit, Gary.
Yeah.
No, Gary doesn't actually drive fast. He just thinks he does. Gary also, you love kind of J-pop on your drives home.
What?
Like, what's it? Deja Vu.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Eurobeat. So that's like Eurobeat.
I have a Spotify playlist called Commuting to Eurobeat. It's effing mental. And I just, I'll have to get up there. It does make you drive faster.
Can you tell me about your best favourite gigs of all time? Or favourite people you've worked with? Both can be related or not related.
We did 2 shows in July for our album, and they were really, really nice. We went to London and did our first show in London ever, not just as this band, like as individuals. And, you know, it was a big risk. We put a lot out there, but it was really, really rewarding. And then we came back here and played a show here, and it was all really affirming, and kind of that helped with drawing the line under the album. It's like, you know, that made it feel really successful. And it doesn't matter how many streams or, you know, what it gets now. It's like those shows were really, you know, great, and it was nice to feel so supported and kind of, you know.
Yeah. And I think on topic of affirming, like, I don't know about you, but I went through a phase of being like, I could never gig again, and I would never be bothered because I preferred doing like studio stuff. And it was really nice to just come back from these gigs when, like, actually, for what it's worth, that like 30, 45 minutes on stage is actually what you do it for. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, just to feel like a rock star being on the tube with my guitar and pedal board and banging into people. Yeah, that was fun. It was quite affirming, to be honest.
Yeah.
That London show was quite it felt quite emotional for me, because I feel like the Leicester show was really fun and exciting. A big part that was like, you know, playing to all our friends and stuff in Leicester. But the London show was like, I have a lot of friends in London, a lot of family around that area, and a lot of them came, like all my friends and my family came. And I mean, for Chris and Gary, the Leicester show was a bit more like nerve-wracking for them, but the London show for me, because it felt like it was my big, my circle. I felt like I mean, my friend helped me book. Actually, Chris booked that one actually. All my friends came, and it was like the first time any of them had ever seen me like play in a band, especially my family. And that was a really, really big emotional gig for me. And I didn't realise how stressed I was about it all until like afterwards. Like, I think we got back to the apartment, everyone went to go food, and I just like got in a shower, and I just like had like a really big emotional moment.
It's weird, isn't it? Because it's like you could be told anyone's in the audience from like NR people or anybody, and then like your mum and dad are there, and it's actually really, it puts me on edge, but like it's because you want to do good for them. But like you said, it is weird just having your own circle of people rather than like your friends and stuff. Like, family's a big thing for me.
Yeah, we did those shows all under our own steam, really. We booked the venues, and we reached out to sports we wanted to support us, and kind of it's just really nice and really rewarding doing that instead of just turning up to a venue in Sheffield and you know, not really knowing what to expect. Someone else has kind of arranged it all for you, and it's all a bit shit.
Is that kind of like DIY mentality something that's important to you with how you operate in the band?
I think it is, because like we've done so many of those shows with shit promoters. Can I swear? Yeah,
I'm swearing.
Every single person has asked that.
But it's like I've done so many of those shows now with dodgy promoters, and just feeling like it doesn't really matter if you do good or do bad, because you're just there to sell drinks, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to do it DIY, because like we were in charge of support, we were in charge of venues, we were just in charge of everything and paying people, which was really nice, to be honest.
Yeah,
Quite refreshing.
We were able to pay kind of everyone as well. It's
Yeah.
like we've done so many shows for free. We were able to pay everyone, and like we didn't lose money as well on the shows, which, you know, as much as that's is new, that, you know, that was really nice as well. Kind of really part of what made it so rewarding is like you're not looking at, you know, money in the bin for nothing. So
Whilst we're here, do you have anything upcoming that you'd like to share with everyone?
our album is called Remember Who We Love, and you know, it's about kind of your friends and kind of maybe losing sight of how much they mean to you, as kind of a large part, but also like we're collaborating with a few people, which is good. So, you know, watch out for music from Henry Webb and Freya Rose, and anyone else. Scumbag Lion maybe might be releasing an EP sometime soon. It's guys of the band. So,
Yeah. Hope for an EP from Scumbag Lines. Yeah.
So those are things to look out for from the world of breakfast.
I don't want to sound big-headed, but I think getting the waffle was the alpha move.